and that sort of stuff.
Cool. Something that we spoke about, actually no, when did we speak about it? I know we spoke about it when we were getting a cup of tea last week, but I think we mentioned it a little bit in last week's roadbook blog post on dirtgame.com as well. We were kind of talking about it's almost like everything that we've learnt to this point with regards to the car handling and I think internally we probably call it Vehicle Pass 2.0, but we haven't really given it a public kind of name yet. It's basically the changes that we're going to be making to improve the cars.
Yeah.
I mean, what kind of things will we be doing, and how's it going to improve the handling of all the cars?
So, I mean, this has obviously been the first project that we've done where we've put our handling out there and people have been able to give us feedback right from the start. But prior to that, for the best part of a year and a half, we've been tweaking our handling and improving it as a prototype within the studio. Now, the things that we've learned, both from the feedback that we've been getting from the community, but also by learning new stuff about different vehicles, by going and speaking to the rallycross teams, has meant that the cars that we launched with are missing some of the stuff that the cars that have gone into this rallycross pack have got. And really V2 is our kind of internal terminology for what we think our more finished version of the physics should be. So a lot of that stuff comes from learnings that we made about air resistance with the Pikes Peak pack, learning about the tyres and roll centres and anti-squat and anti-dive technology from the rallycross teams, stuff to do with engine friction and engine inertias. And some of the cars, like the kit cars that we added into Germany, they've got less engine friction and they've got better air resistance tech in there. And you can feel those cars being a lot more alive than some of the cars that we released in the first launch pack. So really it's a case of refactoring all of the cars and bringing them up to this higher standard so that, you know, everything feels much more alive and much more in tune with what we know we can do from the system. And you know, it's an ongoing thing. Like even today, just before the live stream, the simulation guys were trying to get me to go over to try something because they've had another.
You were mic'd up.
I know, I was mic'd up and I'm sort of strapped into the sofa, but it sounds like they've got another eureka moment there for us to go and get hands on with. So you know, we don't want this to be a situation where we've launched content into the game and that's where it stays. We always want to be iterating on this stuff and trying new things and getting it out there for you guys to try. And I think V2 is a nice name for it. Actually, it implies that there is, you know, a fairly big rework being done on the cars, and the results are looking really, really positive already. But there's more to come.
So something else that we're seeing on screen now is obviously we've added in another layer to the rallycross we've now got sort of the weather, so we're doing hell in the wet at the moment. What kind of changes does that make to, I suppose, what people would have been used to doing the rallycross circuits in the dry last month? So what kind of dynamic does it throw into the mix now when it's raining?
Yeah, so in rallycross, when they call a wet race, the teams obviously change to their wet tyres. So the change is not necessarily as dramatic as you'd expect it to be because the tyres are cut differently and are designed so that, you know, they can cope with the wet conditions. But because they're still derived from essentially a cut slick, the wet weather tyre on the dirt sections of the track actually has a more dramatic difference than that you'll see when you're going from dry tarmac to dry gravel. On the rallycross circuits, so it's definitely a lot more slipping and sliding around in general because you're in the wet, but it's more pronounced on the dirt side of it. So this is actually a wet race, but we haven't got the rain falling. But obviously there's the version of the weather with the rain falling as well. But this is the reason we held this back was because we wanted to spend a bit more time on our visual effects, making sure that the particles and the kick up that was getting thrown up from the cars in front was really going to affect you. Obviously, we're not seeing that because Robson's miles out in the lead in this particular race. But
there's a little bit in the rearview mirror.
Yeah. I mean, the spray's great, but it's when you get onto the rough stuff and you start getting a bit of mud thrown up there as well. It does make a huge difference.
Have adjustable cockpit view anytime soon?
So, depends what that particular person means by adjustable cockpit view. But what we are doing with this particular update is expanding the range of the field of view so that you'll be able to adjust your view settings a lot more than we previously allowed you to do. So let us know if that has helped improve things. I'm hoping it's made some improvements for the guys with multiple screens as well, although we haven't specifically done it for those guys. We just wanted to open it up a bit more. Now, traditionally we haven't done that in the past because it started to clip a little bit in the cockpit, and by clip I mean you start.
It's like you go through the car.
Yeah, bits don't draw properly, and our quality assurance teams like to bug that stuff when it happens. But I think because it's a PC version, we want players to be having as much adjustment as possible. We've allowed for a little bit of clipping to occur at the far extremes of it, but what it means is you can get a lot more range on your field of view, and that should open up that sense of being able to adjust the cockpit experience much more to your liking. So hopefully that's at least some way towards what people have been asking for in terms of adjustability.
We've had a very nice holiday with World RX, but I suppose sort of coming forward, we're looking at sort of jumping back into rally, obviously with Finland. What kind of stage are we at now with something like that when we're about?
And they got quite far ahead, and then we looked at some of the stuff that was coming back and we weren't quite happy with it. So actually a lot of the time that they'd made up by getting ahead, we actually ended up using up to refine and polish up the track. Now a lot of that came from the fact that we'd researched the particular stage that we're including in autumn, and so the foliage was not quite as dense as it had appeared if you watch the onboards from Rally Finland, where it's kind of high summer and there's a lot of greenery around. So as a result, the edges of the track felt a little bit far away from you, and the experience was a little bit muted. You didn't get that sense of speed that I think players would be expecting from Finland, seeing as it's one of the fastest rallies, if not the fastest rally on the calendar. So we spent a lot of time adjusting the density of the bushes. It's still autumnal foliage, so it is going to look a bit browner than perhaps people were expecting, but we've done that so that it offsets that feel against Wales. So you get a bit more of a palette difference between Wales and Finland, but the foliage density's there, the track's the right width now, and the crests and jumps are just unbelievable. And I think the coolest thing is taking a V2 car down there. It's next level. It really, really is. I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but yeah, I'm really excited about it. And yeah, you absolutely have to listen to your co-driver, because the trouble with Finland is you're spending so much time flat out that you can zone out from what the co-driver's saying, and then there will be a corner that you'll have to slow down for that you'll have missed, and then before you know it, you're barrel rolling through the trees. So yeah, it's one to really keep listening to your co-driver, keep preempting those crests and corners, and make sure that the position of the car is exactly where it needs to be, because yeah, it's all about getting those fractions of a second by keeping it as pinned as you dare. But one little mistake and it's a proper big moment when you do go off in Finland. And just on that point of it being flat out the whole way through, we've actually made the track longer than a lot of our other tracks to account for the fact that you are flat out for a large proportion of it. So your overall experience is going to be pretty similar to some of the other locations that we've got. But to do that, we've made the track a bit longer to account for it. And something else that we're looking at doing in the future is a bit of Steam Workshop support, so that players can share their force feedback settings. So when you've found a good setting on your wheel, you'll be able to upload that to Steam Workshop and then be able to share that with the community, which I think will help players get get their settings dialed in, because there's a few people that have gone out there and bought wheels because they've loved this game so much, but they're conscious of the fact that the wheel will make the experience that much better. But because they're inexperienced with having the wheel, they don't really know which settings to dial in which areas. So being able to sort of try out some people's recommended settings, I think will really help with that stuff.
KK, he or she, actually, I don't know, wants to know, does the partnership with FIA World RX end here, or will it be continued?
It definitely doesn't end here. You know, it was a long time getting that deal together, and we're certainly looking to continue our partnership with those guys into the future. This is just the start. I think it's a really good, strong start. We've got you know, really good information from the teams about how they set up their cars and what their cars are capable of. We've got great information from World RX about the tracks, and moving forwards, we want to enhance that relationship even more. We've got some incredibly exciting things on the horizon, but I just can't talk about them yet because they are still in that early stages of trying to work out how we're going to go about doing it. But you know,
it's basically post-it notes at the moment.
It is. It's at the post-it note phase, but it's stuff that we've been talking about every time we meet up with the RX guys. They're all so motivated and excited to hear about what we can do with our technology and what they can give us with their technology. And it's really just a case of starting to bring those streams together and start to join the dots. And I think, you know, we're both highly motivated franchises, and we want to work together to make each other stronger. And I think it's one of the best things about working with those guys is that they get what we do and we get what they do, and it's just a case of joining together to kind of like yeah, one of those cartoons that I probably shouldn't mention where stuff joins together and makes itself stronger.
I don't know where you were going.
In this new update.
Yes. So that's a big thing. So tell us, see, to me, I wrote that patch note, and I'll be straight, I honestly didn't quite know what it meant, because I don't think I personally aren't at the same level as a lot of the people that have been asking it.
Yeah.
So what does that do?
Well, in a nutshell, if you wanted to use the clutch previously, you had to set manual with clutch. So your only way of being able to use the clutch kick technique was to drive manual with clutch, but not everybody wants to drive manual with clutch all the time. So what we've done is we've included the option to allow you to have the clutch as an active input, even if you're not using it for every gear shift. So you can dip the clutch and just essentially spin up the rear wheels in a rear wheel drive car. And it's a useful driving technique when you're driving around a hairpin. You've maybe gone round, but the car hasn't stepped out quite enough. You can give a quick clutch kick. That'll light up the rear wheels and allow you to kind of make that hairpin a little bit more aggressively than you would have done before. So it's kind of freeing up an option and allowing players to use those techniques that drivers use in real life. It was actually something that Kevin Abring called out when he came into the studio, and he was trying the Lancia 037, and one of the things he really wanted to be able to do was to use the clutch to just upset the rear end a little bit and light up those rear wheels. So yeah, glad we've got that one in. Something that I've hinted at in one of the dirt road books was this idea of brushing up on my rally theory. So I'm still in the process of doing that, but probably the largest body of work for me this week is starting to put pen to paper on some guides on how to drive a rally car.
So this is for like a tutorial section?
Yeah, so it is, but it isn't. I don't want to call them tutorials because that implies interactivity. This is more of a guide. This is more of a book on how to be a rally driver, that you can read as little or as much as you want to, and take that knowledge and apply it out on stage. I don't want people to feel like they have to practice the same corner 500 times. This is more about an understanding of what you need to do to get better and more consistent when you're out on stage. And you know, it's applicable to real life as well. So, you know, the techniques that you employ in rally driving are helpful throughout. And yeah, so it's really just a case of getting that stuff together and then working out what format we're going to deliver it in.
Being able to add multiplayer to other areas of the game, perhaps like rally or maybe even hill climb.
So again, always a possibility. It's something that we are investigating. I'm hoping that we can take the stuff that we're learning from this and any feedback that we're getting from it, and we can apply that to rally. But I don't want to give any promises just yet, because there's a lot of people now who will have this update who will be finding stuff that perhaps we haven't found in-house. But yeah, I don't think we're going to get the staggered starts kind of rally that people might remember from Dirt 3. But the opportunity to race against one another in the same session and see your times coming through on the split times. I'm not talking about ghosts flicking around, and I think it's more just a case of being able to chat with your friends and race online together in the heat of the moment, rather than doing it asynchronously, is something that we would like to do. It's now just a case of whether we can fit it in with all the other stuff that we want to improve.
Yeah, I suppose that's probably one of the other things the differences between Dirt 3 and Dirt Rally. With Dirt 3, I mean, it was awesome to do that sort of stuff, but it's almost like it kind of fitted with what it was, because it was quite video gamey in places, and that was very much like a video gaming mode. It was like somebody sets off and then 10 seconds later you go off. In the real world, you don't really sort of compete in a rally like that, do you?
Yeah, I mean, the majority of rallies is minute intervals. When it gets really dusty, they do 2-3 minute intervals to let the dust clear. The rally that John and I did in Somerset in April, we had one stage that was 30-second intervals, because it was a second running of the stage and they kept the field kind of rolling through. So you'd all go through at minute intervals, and then once the majority of the field had gone through, they'd then start feeding the next load of drivers in at 30 seconds. But that was like a really short 1 minute long stage, so they could do that because they knew that the stage could be cleared quite quickly by the drivers. But when you get into a big long stage, if something happens, then you don't want to block the stage for 60 competitors, so they do space them out. And certainly with Dirt Rally, I think it would make sense to have the staggered starts, but is that going to be fun at minute intervals, waiting potentially 8 minutes before you can even take the start of the stage? I don't know, some guys might really want to do that, but it seems a bit too much to ask for the majority of players. So we'll look at doing it from a simultaneous start kind of perspective and see where that gets us.
Another question that came in quite a lot from a couple of different people in different places. It was regards to sort of how we've been using feedback sort of so far, not necessarily to do with the bugs, but with regards to I suppose the suggestion box that we've got running on the Steam forums and on obviously on the Codemasters forums. Something that I did last week was kind of go through them, everything that's already up there, and try to boil down what I feel the most important things people are asking for, and then obviously I'll pass it over to you and to the design team. What kind of happens then with everybody's ideas sort of past that? Like so where does that list go?
Yeah, so we create user stories off the back of pretty much all of the features that have been suggested, and we get a pretty good are the most important things and what are just the odd person coming up with an insane suggestion. Now sometimes those insane suggestions are actually golden, and occasionally they're quite easy to implement, and we can slot them in quite easily.
Like the joystick support we added in this one.
Yeah, but even the little things like being able to repair a puncture on stage, that was actually quite an easy thing for us to do. But the guys that are out there asking for 500 kilometres of road section in between stages, that sort of stuff is quite quickly put on the not this time pile, because ultimately there's Euro Truck Simulator available on all PC platforms, so go out and play that if you want to do 500 miles in between stages and then come back and do your Dirt Rally stage. But I don't know, I think it's a case of taking what we can do and compiling that into a usable list that we can manage. And you know, as with all game development, there is a time limit available and a resource limit available as to what we can do. But I think a lot of the key improvements we've made have been driven by the community's feedback. I know we keep talking about it, but the force feedback thing is just a golden example of where we thought what we'd done was the right thing. And it was only when you guys came out and shouted at us about how it was definitely not the right thing that we took a step back and looked at it and made that huge improvement. And now we can't believe that we ever played the game in the way that we played it before we released. And we wouldn't ever think about doing it that old way ever again. So, you know, it's just that thing of, you know, there's some stuff that we've thought about and we hear it echoed in the community. There's plenty of stuff that we haven't thought about. We hear it being talked about a lot. And so I guess it's part of what we do as game developers. And one of the biggest changes is being able to listen and use that as a guide as to what we are adjusting and improving and introducing as new features into the experience.
Cool.